Hello, everyone.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. On today's podcast, we are going to be talking about how a head of household can kind of make amends to his taken in hand after he messes up a little bit, drops the ball, makes a mistake, however you want to say it. How does he kind of make it up to her and rebuild that connection, rebuild that trust?
But before we do that, make sure that you like this video and subscribe because it makes me smile. And if you want to know some more ways that you can support our channel and that you can be more involved in the discipline life, the link to those are down below in the description.
So last week we talked all about what happens when a head of household messes up. What are his consequences? And we kind of teased in that episode that we would talk through how does a head of household go about making amends with the taken in hand? How does he go about rebuilding that trust and that connection? Because I think that that's really at the heart of it. When we talked through that whole topic, that's really one of the biggest consequences for a head of household is that his mistakes can cause division in the relationship, and then it's his responsibility to create connection and to bridge that division.
And more than just cause division, a lot of times it can really spiral everything in the household out of control, because just like anything in life, when the leader is somehow displaced or not in his best form, everything else falls out of place. So how does he go about making amends? Well, the simple answer is, oh, I'm sorry, you move on. But that really, when especially some things in the relationship have been damaged, it's not that I'm sorry isn't a good place to start. But the first thing is head of households, you need to acknowledge what has happened, that you have dropped the ball, and acknowledge that you understand why certain things have already happened in the relationship and that you see how things have spiraled out of control.
Don't downplay the importance of an apology, though. It might surprise you how far a sincere apology will go with your taken in hand. I know that any time that Coda has dropped the ball, missed the mark, him coming to me, acknowledging what happened, acknowledging his responsibility in that, and asking for my forgiveness and giving me that sincere apology and acknowledgement of what he did, that goes so far to just bridge that connection. Because what really happens is when Coda drops the ball, when I am feeling hurt by something that he's done, I tend to put up some defenses. And that apology really does kind of break down my defenses and creates an atmosphere where I'm then receptive to rebuilding that connection in our relationship again.
And head of households, as Aria was saying, that remember to not skip that step. That's very, very important. And many of us, we have trouble with the apologies. It's hard for us sometimes as head of households to acknowledge that we've blown it. It's hard to realize that, wow, the problem was nobody else but me this time. But it is so important to rebuilding the relationship, to rebuilding the trust, to rebuilding the hurt feelings that have happened, to do that apology and to say I'm sorry and to acknowledge that you've messed up. And then I would say the next thing that you need to do is that you need to probably have multiple conversations about where things went wrong and how to fix it. But first starting with what went wrong. What did I do that caused this to spiral out of control? And was it even something, figure out if that was something you were aware of or you weren't aware of. There's a lot of times where I've messed up where I've had to scratch my head and go, I don't actually know where things went off course, what happened. And it was something I was totally unaware of. And so it's okay to go to your taken in hands and say, okay, I'm kind of clueless. I need some help in finding out where we went wrong here.
The last time we went through this process, I would even describe it as kind of like we took a day on one of Coda's days off, where we kind of did almost like a mini boot camp. It was very unstructured. It had none of the structure of a boot camp that we usually do. But it was just a day where we were like, okay, we are blocking out this day to focus on us and to have these conversations. So we sat down and had every meal together that day, and we talked through some really big things, and we talked through everything that had happened. Coda gave me the opportunity to share my feelings, air any grievances I had. Of course, I was respectful. That's never like in any of these conversations, there are still expectations and there's still structures that you have to uphold. So take it in hands. Don't take this as an opportunity to be disrespectful or to, be angry or irate. Like, it's okay if you're feeling irritated. It's okay if you're feeling angry, but you have to communicate that effectively and you have to communicate that with respect. But Coda gave me that opportunity to tell him everything that I was feeling and where I was. And that way we could talk through everything that had happened. He was able to give me his perspective and where he was at mentally and why things happened the way they did.
And in doing that, did that help rebuild some of the trust? Did that help rebuild some of the things that we had lost?
Yes. And I think that in that specific situation, we needed to come to some conclusions and we needed to create an action plan of how to move forward. And so it really created an atmosphere of not only rebuilding that trust, but also getting us on the same page to where we could where we could create an action plan of how to move forward in our relationship in a way that honored our roles and honored the structure of our relationship and what we wanted it to look like, not necessarily what it was looking like at that moment.
And the key piece here, head of households, is, and this is not easy for me, it's not easy to sit down and have a conversation and listen to your taken in hand, talk about where you've blown it and where you hurt them. That's a very uncomfortable conversation. And so this is a step, again, that you may think, oh, well, we can just wipe the slate clean. I'm the king of trying to wipe slates clean and forget about it. The problem is that if you don't address what happened, you're going to be right back in the same place that you were. And so one of the things that we've tried to foster, especially in that conversation, why you need to not skip this step, is that you can say, you know what, we actually can't wipe the slate clean, but what we can do is build a brand new foundation on the things that we're trying to correct and move forward from here and learn the lessons that have happened during this whole thing. And so that's why don't skip any step of this conversation. It is uncomfortable, especially emotionally. It's emotionally uncomfortable to the point where you may even be physically uncomfortable, but don't skip it. It's going to mean a lot to your taken in hand. And I think in the end, it will mean a lot to you because what you'll realize is you can get each other back on the same page and the relief happens after that. But that's why I've always said that's the head of household spanking right there. That uncomfortable feeling that you're going to have because of what you know you've done to your spouse, and then having to hear where you've messed up and where you need to make changes, that's really, really uncomfortable for you. And so you don't get off scot-free, obviously. So then one of the things that you need to make sure that you do, and this was a step that I actually almost skipped, and that is after you've had this conversation, take time to really talk about rules that maybe need to be amended, reestablished. Go through everything. Say, does the punishment, the way we have structured punishments, does that still work? The way we've scheduled resets, does that still work? All of the different rules do we have? Do we need more? Do we need less? Do we need to amend some? Go through that with your taken in hand and go through step by step, because here's why. You're rebuilding the foundation. You've got to find out where the cracks were in the original foundation, rebuild those so that you can move forward.
I definitely think that it was very, very helpful to me for Coda to take the initiative and lead that conversation.
Definitely.
And to lead that process. And I think that that's really important, is that especially with what we just went through, I was kind of thrown out of my headspace as a taken in hand, and I was starting to feel like I was kind of having to drive the relationship and drive the house a little bit. And so it was really important for me to acknowledge that that was really disruptive to the relationship. I needed to apologize for that. I know that Coda mentioned earlier that as a head of household, when you mess up, you have to apologize. It was really important for me too to be able to acknowledge and apologize for my part in the situation. But the fact that he apologized first really helped me be able to come and follow his lead in that and apologize for my part of what was going on. And this whole day of conversations, this whole day of like focusing on our relationship and rebuilding that structure, it was Coda's idea. He came to me and was like, this is what we're doing today. And it was really important that he took that initiative to lead that process, to reestablish himself as the leader of our home, as my head of household.
And head of households, what's hard about that is you feel like because you've blown it, you feel like, well, I don't have any right to not only take the leadership role again, but I don't have any right to then say, hey, we're going to fix this, we're going to do this. Yes, you do. That's part of what you have to do. And that's part of the being uncomfortable that you have to get over. You have to realize that even though you've blown it, even though you haven't done a very, very good job, the only way it's going to get back on track is that your taken in hand needs you again to reestablish the relationship, to do all the things that we've just talked about, but especially say, hey, today is the day that we're going to fix it. We're going to put all the ducks back in a row. We're going to relay the foundation, begin rebuilding the house again, and move forward and learn those lessons. That's so important.
I desperately needed Coda to do that. Like, if he would have used his feelings of, not feeling like he had that right or not feeling like he should be doing that because of the emotional turmoil that he was going through, knowing that he dropped the ball, if he would have used that as an excuse to kind of like not take that leadership, it would have perpetuated our problem. It would have made things worse. I desperately needed him to take leadership in our home again. And he didn't do it in a domineering way. He didn't do it in a demanding way. He didn't have to demean me in the process, but it was as simple as him coming to me and was like, hey, what do you have planned for Saturday? And I was like, oh, nothing really. He's like, good, keep it that way because this is what we're doing.
Yeah, and that's why it is so important, head of households, that you just establish that. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that went a long way also for you to go, okay, he's trying to initiate taking control again, and I can give him back some of these things that I've been carrying, some of these burdens.
Yes, absolutely. Because, like I said, I had kind of put my guard up. I had become defensive. And him just taking that initiative to say, this is what we're going to do. We are going to talk through things. We're going to make things right. So I don't want you to be distracted. I do not want you to make any plans for that day because we're taking the day to spend together and get things right. That was the first initial step in kind of allowing me to let my guard down. And then the next part was that he led with sincerely apologizing for what he had done. And that allowed me to then look through the situation with a clear lens and say, you know what, I have some things to apologize for too. Let me do that. And then we can move forward in a productive way. Again, it's all about reestablishing the mindsets in your relationship for your roles. So I needed to reestablish a mindset of being under Coda's authority and being under his leadership, being accountable to him, and the only way I could do that is if I saw him taking the initiative to put himself in the position of authority.
And I think that's a big one, head of households. these days, authority in any regard is looked at as a bad thing. It's looked at as a oppressive thing. But what you have to get out of your head is that it's an oppressive thing. Authority is only oppressive if the person in charge is being oppressive. And we know that the role that you have taken is not to be an oppressor. The role that you have taken is to take the burden off of your taken in hand, to lead your household well, to take that burden off of your family and direct it towards the direction that you need it to go and want it to go, so that stress and tension and the things that the taken in hand doesn't want to have to deal with, you can. And that's ultimately what the goal is. And so that's why it's okay to say, you know what, I need to pick this back up. I'm going to pick it back up for the sake of myself, for the sake of my taken in hand, and for the sake of my family. This is okay to do because I'm not an oppressor, but I'm a person that helps move things forward because I ultimately do care about her well-being. And that's the thing that you have to remember.
Now, I think that another thing that we did is during this day where we were focusing on our relationship is we also took time to have lighthearted conversation to just build an emotional connection between us. It wasn't all focused on what went wrong and what we need to do. I mean, we had those conversations too.
We did.
But we also took time just to spend some quality time together and really emotionally reconnect as a couple. Coda took me out to lunch that day. And so just being able to kind of get out of the house and, I did take it as he was trying to treat me a little bit so that we could kind of take some time to build that connection together in a way that felt really meaningful.
It's always important, no matter what, to date your taken in hand. So do that as much as you can, but especially in these scenarios, it's good to get out. It's good to get amongst people and, like she said, just reconnect. And then the step that I almost skipped, and it's a step that after we took that step, I realized no matter if this happens again, not if, but when, because it will. It's just going to happen. We're not perfect. It is going to happen. You try to make it happen less and less, but it is going to happen again. When it does, this is a step do not skip. We did a maintenance or a reset, as we call it. And again, I almost skipped this step because the conversation we had was good. We reestablished the rules. We did all of those things. And so I thought, well, maybe we don't need to do that. But no, we needed to do it for a bunch of different reasons. Arya needed it to, again, let those emotions go, to be that final piece to reestablish myself as the head of household and where she now fits back. But also, believe it or not, it was good for me. It's good for us head of households to remember, you know what? We're reestablishing here the order of things and how things are going to go. And we need to go through this process with our taken in hands so that emotions officially get out and the final part of the foundation is laid so that you can move forward. So don't skip the reset or the maintenance. Spanking, don't underestimate how powerful that really, really is.
I desperately needed Coda to do that maintenance because I needed to feel the connection to my role as being taken in hand, as being under his authority, to feel that he is assuming authority again. And I really, really needed that connection to reconnecting with the proper mindset in my role. And it was imperative that we did that for the success that we wanted to have. Now, if you would have skipped that step, I probably would have gotten a spanking sooner rather than later, but it would have been a punishment for kind of getting out of that role, because without that maintenance, it would have been harder for me to assume my proper role again. And so I probably would have ended up making a mistake and earning myself a punishment. And that's disruptive, especially when we're trying to reestablish the structure of our relationship. And so we really wanted to avoid that. And I think having that maintenance was imperative to our goal to avoid having mistakes happen and having punishments potentially being earned.
Definitely. And so the reason I bring that up, head of households, is it's hard. One of the hardest things that I've ever had to do is not necessarily lead in the domestic discipline relationship, although that does have its own challenges. It's reestablishing the ability to lead after something like this. And so I did not realize how difficult it was to make that decision again because of second guessing myself because of what happened. But it's important that you make that decision. Don't put that and ask your taken in hand whether or not that would be good or not, because that's also another mistake that can be made. And so don't do that. Just make the decision you're going to do the maintenance spanking, follow through with it, and you'll find out. I mean, as soon as we did all of these things, it did feel like that we had learned the lessons, that the slate, to a certain extent, had been wiped clean, and we could move forward with everything.
And that maintenance was a lot longer and a lot harder than most of our maintenances.
Yes.
Because not only had we come off of a few weeks of not having any spankings at all, but also because I had been so guarded, because I had been so far out of the proper mind space that I needed to be in. It took a lot for me to kind of let those defenses down, let that guard down, and really accept and yield to the process of the maintenance so that I could view Coda as my authority, as my head of household, in the way that honors our relationship and honors the goals we have for our relationship.
Absolutely. So remember, when you are trying to reestablish the relationship, to dedicate a day and don't skip any steps. And really remember, in the end, it's about reestablishing the order of things so that you both can be effective in the roles that you've taken in the relationship and that make your relationship great, which is why we're domestic discipline type people. And why it's so important that if you're a part of that, to really work hard to reestablish that. These things are going to happen. Accidents, as they say, are going to happen, and mistakes are going to be made. So what you want to do is just remember to, because we're all human, to try to do your best to move forward. And we hope that these tips that we shared with you today are going to be helpful.
All right, guys, thanks so much for joining us. I really do hope that kind of gave you some insight into how to navigate these situations, because like Coda said, it's not a matter of if you will face these things, it's a matter of when, because in relationships, things are going to ebb and flow. You're going to face these challenges from time to time. And so it's really good to have kind of a game plan going into it, knowing how you can kind of navigate through these harder situations. So hopefully we did that for you. We'd love to know your thoughts in the comments, and hope to see you next week, and we will talk to you later.
See you later.